Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. The European Union bankrolled Zimbabwe's 2023 elections. In this video clip, Sengezo Tshabangu reveals how much the European Union poured into Zimbabwe's 2023 elections. What I'm interested in is why. Why did the European Union bankroll Zimbabwe's 2023 elections when they knew, of all people, they knew that those elections were flawed? And to quote David Coltart, so flawed, so illegal, the only logical step was to withdraw. Let's just hear what Tshabangu was saying in this interview and how much we are talking about here.
Or any other account. There were accounts, several of them. President Chamisa, I'll tell you, he has got an account. Somewhere. All right? A party has got an account. Coltart, when we formed the CCC in January, he drove from Bulawayo to Harare to open an account as the treasurer. And the criminals around President, because they've already captured him, they told him that we've opened the account. And then he said, wow, how? No, we've opened the account. We have used the technical staff to open the account. So there's an account, which is pseudo, where Coltart is not a signatory, yet he was the treasurer. He drove back. So there are multiple accounts.
So now, as the STU open account and not the treasurer?
Yes, I am the Secretary General.
So what is the role of the treasurer? Who's the treasurer?
Well, we appointed the acting treasurer.
Who is the acting treasurer?
No, you will see when these things come, when these things unfold. There is somebody who acted on that basis in order for us to facilitate that opening of the account. But your question was on accountability.
Yes.
Yes, the party fears accountability. Let me tell you, we know one thing for certain, that we received the money from the European Union that was intended to pay the polling agents. So Zanu PF received the same amount.
Is this a myth or is it fact?
It's not a myth. It's not a myth. We received that money. Our polling agents today are not paid.
How much money are we talking about here?
We're talking about 2.something million. And in next week, early next year, I'll be writing to the president. I need accountability. Those people who were in charge of that money, because that money was dispersed outside my authority. We need accountability. Our polling agents are not paid as we speak. Where did that money go? We went to the campaign. We received monies. So people are coming out and say, we put the money on the presidential campaign, we put the money on the members of parliament so that their nomination fees are paid for by the party. And most of the nomination fees, individuals, candidates paid for their money. Where was that money? Where did that money go? So we will be writing to the president soon, seeking for accountability. So we are putting the order. Those who will be outside or those who misappropriated the funds, then law is going to take its course.
You know, I've heard this on social media, this issue of money, the European Union, and all this kind. I would say, I mean, for the record, I don't have the evidence or the know-how that, but I'm sure what we are talking about, you know, for a fact that the money came in, because we are trying to make sure that it's not speculation, but there was money that was.
There was money. That money is confirmed by ZANU itself. They received the money.
So it was confirmed by ZANU and
yes.
not Triple C.
Both parties that were contesting in the election were given that money. That money was there to do one, training of the polling agents, deployment of the polling agents, taking care of the affairs of the polling agents, food, transport, etc., and stuff like that, so that the election becomes credible. We didn't want a situation whereby the election, there is no polling agent for another political party, therefore it jeopardizes, it compromises the outcome of the election. So that was the essence of that money.
So,
well, what has got to be understood here is is that this election process could not be free, fair, and credible. And this was understood more so by the European Union, because it must be emphasized here that the European Union did send a high-powered election observer team to the 2018 elections, Zimbabwe 2018 elections. And their report was damning as much as it was thorough. Those elections failed to meet international standard. They made that very clear. That final report also came up with recommendations. There were about 23 recommendations that the government was given. The opposition had a copy. None of those recommendations were ever implemented. Months before the 2023 elections, the European Union sent a team to see on the progress of the implementation of those reports. The European Union had even funded some of those reforms to help the process. The team that came reported back and said not even a token reform had been implemented. Not even a token reform had been implemented. The opposition itself also knew that no meaningful reforms were implemented. And so all this talk about being bankrolled so that we can have election agencies at polling stations is just a fig leaf. Because if you look at the 2018 election, the European Union report itself, it goes into details of some of the irregularities, blaring irregularities in the illegalities. The failure to produce a verified voters' roll, for instance, that cannot be cured by having election agencies at polling stations. The process is already flawed. What happens on voting day, yes, has got a contribution to the process, but it's only a part of it. And by failing to make sure that SAC was independent, for instance, which was one of the recommendations in the European Union. Whatever you do on voting day would not change the fact that an election commission, ZEC, that is not independent, will have done a lot of damage already to the process. So one has got to go back to the European Union and say, well, you knew this process was flawed. You knew that it was so flawed, so illegal. The only logical step was to withdraw. You did not withdraw, did you? You decided to bankroll it. Why? Why are you bankrolling a process that you know is so flawed and so illegal? It will never produce a meaningful result. That is a question that the European Union must answer. The truth of the matter is, the European Union has always had its own agenda. And in this particular case, we have got to remember the European Union is a union of many nations. Many of them have a colonial past. A past which they are rightly ashamed of. Belgium, for example, what they did in Congo during the colonial days is unforgivable. It's an outrage. In the picture there is a picture of some of the victims of the Belgian authorities during colonial days. They would cut off the hand of children and wives because their husbands failed to meet the quota for rubber production demanded by the colonial powers. That was the punishment. The history of the barbarism of Belgium during colonial rule in Africa is well known. Demonic barbarism, I call it. Well, colonialism has ended. But unfortunately, history has a habit of repeating itself. The only motivation I can think of why the European Union bankrolled Zimbabwe's 2023 elections when they knew the process is flawed. So flawed, so illegal, the only logical step was to withdraw. They bankrolled it regardless. For demonic, barbaric reasons. They know that by bankrolling the flawed process, they will stop a healthy democratic process emerging. And that is exactly what happened. And that is exactly what is happening here. They knew that by bankrolling Chamisa and company to participate in 2023, they will only give the opposition the determination to participate in the flawed elections no matter what. I don't even want to speculate that anyone in the European Union offices in Harare or Zimbabwe, or even in Europe, believed Chamisa's idiotic lie that he had plugged the vote-rigging loopholes. They are not that stupid. They knew that was a stupid lie. They knew that opposition have been participating in these flawed elections out of greed. They had the opportunity to implement the democratic reforms. They failed to do so out of greed. Mugabe bribed Morgan Tsvangirai and company during the GNU. They failed to implement even one reform. Of course, the European Union knew that. They knew that by giving Chamisa this over $2 million US, he would abuse that money. But it will, most important of all, it will motivate the opposition to participate in these flawed elections no matter what. That's exactly what they did. The European Union knew with no democratic reforms implemented, Zanu PF was going to rig the 2023 elections as it rigged the 2018 elections. So why did they bankroll the 2023 elections? With their own demonic, barbaric reasons. History of the colonial days repeating itself. Albeit this time, they're a bit more subtle than cutting off the hands of children and women. Tragic.